Hello, I am Ugie. A lot of you know me or think you know me, but you only knew the image that I presented to you. But I am going to pour myself out to the world in hopes of reaching the youth, these young men, these young women out here, because obviously Hollywood's not doing it. The social media is definitely not doing it. It's destroying our youth. The music industry is definitely not doing it. It's all misleading. Um, so I'm going to pour myself out and let the world know who I am, and for those that know me, how I am or how I was, I should say, or the reason why I was the way that I was. Um, I would like to apologize to anyone I've ever hurt in my life and to those whom I've misled in my life. To those who may laugh, crack jokes, make fun of me, do what you do. You only proven to me that the word of God is true. For Christ said, before they hated you, they hated me first. Jesus said that, Yeshua. So you would only be proven to me that his word is true. So, with all that said, welcome to my channel. I am Ugie, and I will dig into this. But before I go on speaking about different topics and things that is going on in the world and with our youth, I am going to um, let you know about me and what I've been through. Some things may be traumatizing, so trigger warning to those who are victims of abuse. Um, I will talk and go into some very deep topics and interesting stuff that has happened in my life, and very traumatic stuff that has happened in my life. So you have to excuse me. This is my first time doing this. I don't have experience. I'm not a professional at this. I don't have the professional microphone, the lighting, and all that. I don't care about all of that. As long as you get the message is all that matters to me. Um, so I have little topics here, or talking points, I should say, that I speak on for some stuff I had to write down to remember it. Forgive me if I get emotional sometimes. I may start crying on camera, etc., etc. I don't care about all that men or oh, men don't cry. We men, we men. Miss me with that. A lot of the reasons that men are violent is because we don't let it out. Um, so I will begin. I was born in May in 1982 in Bluefield, West Virginia. At the time, I had four brothers and three sisters that I knew of. We lived in outside of a small town called Bramwell, West Virginia. We um, we had dogs, we had cats, we had geese, and I had rabbits too at one point in time until a bear ate them. Um, we were poor, and the reason why we were poor is because my dad took my mother's money and he left. So we lived in a shack, probably maybe one. It was a three-bedroom shack, and our house was built up on stilts because the river would flood, and they were actually railroad ties, not stilts, but the river would flood, and when the river would crest, and the we were known as the niggas that lived in the ark. um, but we were poor. We were so poor we had a coal stove to heat the house. We didn't have running water in our house. We had well water. Um, If you had to use the bathroom, number one and number two, you had a 5 gallon paint bucket to use, and this was in the 80s. And one of my brothers had the unfortunate task of having to empty the bucket into the river. We lived between a river, and then the train tracks were to the right of the house if you were standing facing it. It was about total, I say, maybe 22 acres, that whole little area there. Can't remember exactly how big the little area the area was, but we had some land in that area that I lived in for part of my time or part of my life. The being in the country, I was a country kid, running around trying to catch fish out of a river with a little Mickey Mouse pole that had the little plastic hook on it. I didn't know I wasn't gonna catch any fish, but I was trying because if you wanted meat to eat, that's what you had, was fish. Out of that river, it was mostly, if I remember correctly, it was like carp or bluegill, if you caught it, sometimes catfish. My brothers and them would do all the fishing. They were responsible for going out to cut wood all the time during the summer, so that way we would have wood to burn in the coal stove that we used to heat the house with. During those times, one time I almost drowned because I couldn't swim, and it was right after a flood, but I had crossed down the train tracks across the train trestle to the other side of the bridge, and I was fishing, and as I was fishing, I was on the side of the hill casting down. Well, I didn't know my mother and them could see me from the house, but in my mind I was just excited to try to catch a fish to bring home, because I thought that my mother would be so happy if I brought home a fish. So I was standing on the side of this hill, the gravel, and I was fishing, and all of a sudden, I hear the little rocks tumbling, like little small rocks just moving. And when I looked down, the whole side of the mountain I was on, or the cliff I was on, the hill, it slid. And it slid down, and I went into a raging river. And it happened so quick that when I went down, I was carried from one side of the river down into the other side of the river, and I was smashed up against a rock. But the way I was smashed up against the rock, and the current that was coming so hard, the waves were coming over my head, so it was like I had room to breathe, and I was terrified. And I made my way up onto this rock that was in the river, or this boulder, and I was able to stand on it. And from standing on the rock, I could see that I could make it to shore if I jumped. So I jumped, and I made it to shore. I was soaking wet, obviously, and I was scared, but that wasn't the most terrifying part of it. What I had found, that because the river was a raging river or whatnot, I washed up the sand and stuff. I actually found an old tackle box that had like a bunch of fishing gear stuff in there, which I thought it was cool. So I carried that up, and I was at the bottom of the train trestle looking up, and I was like, well, how do I get back up here to the top of the bridge? So I was like, well, I gotta walk through the woods and find my way up. So I climbed through the bushes and made my way up the hill through the sticker bushes, or the thorns and thistles. And then I heard the most terrifying sound I could hear. And that was the sound of my mother screaming my name. and I could hear the fear in her voice. What I didn't know was the moment I had fell in the water was the exact moment my mother looked up and seen that I was way down the field on the other side of the river fishing. And before she could tell one of my brothers and them to run down there and get me, all she saw was her little boy go into the river. And as I came up to the top of the train tracks, my mother was running down the train tracks screaming my name. And she grabbed me and held on to me and hugged me. And she asked me, was all right? And I said yes. And then next thing I know, I was spun around like lightning, and she tore my behind up for being down there. But that was my first drowning incident in my life. I could swim now, but I still, I guess, me and water don't really get along, I guess. But that was my first incident with drowning. Also, during that time, you can pull this up in the newspaper, but October 3rd, 1985, in Bramwell, West Virginia, train number 1780 was coming down the tracks. And when we lived, our house was so close to the train tracks that when the train came by, it actually shook the whole house. So in the middle of the night, daytime, the whole house would just shake from the train going by. That's how close we lived to the train tracks. But train 1780 was coming down the tracks. I was coming back from the store with, actually no, it wasn't a store. I was coming back from a family member's house, or a friend of the family's house, with my mother's friend. His name was Ken. And we were coming down the road, down Pinnacle Rock. And it's a steep incline coming down off the mountain into the valley. And in front of us was a church bus. And it was full of people. The church bus could not stop. I guess though, but he lost his brakes, or the brakes went out. There were always accidents right there at the end of the driveway that led to our house, because semi trucks would come and lose their brakes coming down off that grade. And at the bottom, it was a sharp turn, almost like a 90-degree angle turn going into Bramwell. And tractor trailers would always lose their brakes there. Not trains, but tractor trailers would always lose their brakes. But this day it was a church bus, and it couldn't stop. Train 1780, a coal train, was coming. And the bus came down the grade like this, and when it got to the bottom, it met the train at the same time. And the train split this bus in half. And it was bodies all over the road. It was a lot of people died. I remember a lady being carried out of the bus with no leg. Her leg was gone. I seen a guy walk and pick up his arm, and everybody was covered in blood. My mom's friend Ken left me in the car, and he ran down the driveway to go get my mother, and he left me in the car. Well, in deep rural country in the 80s, we were basically the only ones to call 911. And it takes some time for them to get there. So I was left in the car just watching all of this unfold, seeing seen a lot of mangled people. Um, I seen a lot of people crying, a lot of people covered in blood, a lot of bodies on the road, two parts of a bus, the front half, the back half. The train kept going because it couldn't stop right away. Um, my mother and my brothers finally got there. They showed up and they took me back down to the house, and there was a lot of commotion going on in the house. So my mother took me and put me in the bedroom, and she closed the door. She turned on cartoons and she turned it up real loud. She turned the TV up real loud and told me to watch cartoons. Um, Shortly after that, I started hearing the moans and groans of people that were in pain because my mother and my brothers and them started carrying people back to our house to try to tend to them the best they could because ambulances didn't get there really quick. Um, so my mother and them did the best they could, handing out bandages, uh, whatever she could, you know, towels, until the emergency officials got there. So I heard this as a child and had to, I witnessed all of that. Also, living down there in the country, I we were poor, so we were, we had food stamps, the old school food stamps. They used to be paper. We had the government assistance stuff, the powdered milk and the peanut butter that came in a big gray can, and all it had on the front was a peanut, I believe, or something like that. But you peel off the top, and it's all the oil sitting on top, so you have to stir it to mix it up, and then you go to spread it on your bread, and it just rolls the bread up. And then you had the milk to go with it. You pour some in a cup, add some water, and you stir it up, and that was your milk. It was kind of like a cloudy white color. It looked like dirty tap water or something. But we had that, and the block of cheese with the cheese that didn't melt, and you couldn't cut it; it just break up. But at the time, that's how we were living. Um, During those times, I there were a lot of molestations going on in my family that everyone in my family, for the most part, except for one of my older brothers, because he wasn't living with us at the time. He was already gone into the army. But I'm not gonna speak too much on my family members and what they experienced. That's their story to tell. But I know a lot of my family members did experience molestations and stuff from other family members, and growing up, a lot of times they tell you, "Oh, don't talk about it. Don't tell no one. Keep it to yourself." Yada yada yada. It happens a lot in people's homes. It's not a black problem. It's not a white problem. It's not a Hispanic problem. It's an everybody problem. There's a lot of people in the world today who are acting out because they're hurting inside because they've been touched by someone who was supposed to be a loved one, a family member. For me, it was my uncle. And I tell people as a child, you don't know if it's right or if it's wrong. You just know you don't like it. And I didn't know it was wrong until my mother walked in and caught my uncle um, in the act. And she picked me up, she grabbed me, and she cradled me, and she rocked me. And she said, "It'll be okay, it'll be okay." And she went off and started attacking my uncle. And from that point forward, that's when I knew it was wrong. Um, but this is stuff that we, or I experienced, stuff that I experienced being in the country. The When it was bath time to take a bath, we had a tin tub that you literally had to fill up with water to take a bath in, and then of course it would get dumped outside. In the morning, getting dressed for school if it was cold, like the winter time and stuff, like the boys and the girls would stand with their backs turned around the cold stove and get dressed, and before heading out to school, because it was the warmest spot in the house, and that was like the cold stove was in the kitchen. For me, I was in the Head Start program, but as far as I can remember from a youth, I've struggled with my curriculum. So if I struggle with my words and my videos, you have to excuse me. But I'm gonna tell you why my brain doesn't really function like that. But or you will learn why. And you will learn why maybe other kids' brains don't function that well. Um, but my mom used to always take us to church every Sunday, and I remember I used to sing in church. They had me get up in front and sing in church, and I used to sing this song, and I still remember it. Um, but I only sang it when I was little, and I think it was I'm gonna move on up the mountain with my shield and my sword, and I'm gonna pull the devil down because he doesn't have a right to be on higher ground. And I used to sing the song, and it was a whole song, but uh, yeah, that's what I used to do in church on Sunday. Um, during the times of living in West Virginia, my father wasn't around. I think he showed up like one time, and he brought me a little toy water gun, and I was so excited to see my father um, because he was never around then. Um, but as always, him and my mother got into an argument, and then of course he left again, and I didn't see him again until 1989. My mother passed away, and I still remember it because I remember seeing her in the hospital the night before, and I was asking her. I said, "Mommy, when are you going to come home?" Because at that time she had been in the hospital for like a few weeks, and I said, "Mom, when are you coming home?" And she said, "Oh, I'll be home soon, baby. I'll be home soon." And I was a kid, so I believed her. Went home and I went to sleep on the couch. And the next day, one of my brothers, woke me up and he said, "Mom is gone." So, me being a kid and not able to really process what he meant, I said, "What do you mean gone?" I said, "Where'd she go?" Because I'm thinking, like, she left the hospital and went somewhere. He said, "Mom's gone and she's not coming back." I still couldn't understand, still couldn't register. And I said, why isn't she coming back? He said, "Mom's dead." Well, only thing I knew about death or dying then was my my dogs. I hung one of our dogs by accident because one of my brothers tied him up on the porch, and I left a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on the steps, and he tried to get my peanut butter and jelly sandwich and fell off the steps and hung himself. Um, so I remember the dog hanging with his tongue out his mouth, and that's the only thing I could think about when he said my mom was dead. Um, I thought about all the dead snakes that around the property and how they would cut their heads off with a shovel, and the body be sitting there. So that was my example of what being dead meant. So I broke down crying, and I didn't know how to take it. I didn't know how to grieve. I was only 8 years old. Um, but literally somehow then, like, I want to say the next day or the day, yeah, day next day to maybe 2 days, 48 hours later, my father shows up. And I guess he was incarcerated somewhere, and they let him out to come and get his kids or something like that. But my father came, and one of my brothers, didn't trust him, and my brother Ruben didn't trust him at all. So my father was like, "Well, I'm gonna go to the store," but he made me and Angel get in the car. So my brother Ruben didn't trust him, and my brother Ruben was like, "Oh, well, I'm gonna come with you too. Where you going?" He said, "Oh, I was going to the store to get some groceries for the family, to put some groceries in the house, right?" So my brother Ruben said, "Okay, well, I'll go. I'll help." And he got in the car. My dad drove us about 15 miles outside of Bramwell, and he went to a Kroger's. Um, he gave my brother Ruben $5 and told him to go inside and get a loaf of bread. My brother at the time was a teenager. He was probably about 15, 16 himself. Um, so him not thinking, he was like, "Well, let me go in here and get the bread." Well, the moment he walked in the store, my father drove off and left him. And me and Angel didn't understand why. And he told us to be quiet because he was taking us to Ohio. So we never got to see my mother buried. We never got to see our mother buried. He just drove off and took us to Ohio, and it was a long drive from Bramwell, West Virginia to Cleveland, Ohio. Um, from what my brother told me is that he walked all the way back to Bramwell, and he didn't know where we went or what had happened. Nobody knew where we went. My dad just drove off and took us because we were his only two biological kids. My other brothers and sisters that were there were only my half brothers and sisters, so he didn't care about them. And my sister, my sisters, my dad actually molested my sisters. Um, but his biological kids, which was me and my sister Angel, he took us and drove us to Ohio, to Cleveland, to Delford Road, actually in Shaker Heights, it's a suburb in Ohio outside of Cleveland. This was in '89, and I remember being there and meeting who I thought was my real grandmother at the time, which come to find out was my father's adopted parents. But meeting my grandmother, and she was mean. Like this lady was mean. I couldn't stand her. But I used to get yelled at by her because I would be in the bathroom and I would play with the toilet because I was surprised that it flushes like that in the house, that you can have it in the house. Like I've seen toilets in Head Start, and but we didn't have a toilet, and I would always get yelled at because I would flush the toilet and watch the water go down and watch how it fill back up and flush it again, and just why I got a kick out of it. So I got yelled at for that. I had never seen a shower before. I've never seen a tub, so a porcelain tub, I should say. So yeah, I used to get yelled at for playing with the water. Um, but my father dropped us off there, and then of course he was gone again as usual. So now the job of raising us fell on our grandmother. Her name was Lula P. Jernigan, and living on Delford, it was very strange. Trying to adapt was hard. Um, Before my father, like we lived there for probably about, I want to say maybe a month or so, and then my father came back home. And one day, I was standing by the side entrance of the door at the house on Delford Road, and it had stairs that led to the basement by the side door, but it was still inside of the house. And I was standing there just looking outside the door, crying because I wasn't allowed to go outside. Uh, as a kid, I was used to going outside in the country because it's open, it's nothing but fields, and we had apple trees and stuff like that. But city life was different, or suburb life, I should say. Um, so grandma wouldn't let me go outside, and I was just sitting there thinking about how much I hated being there in Shaker, and I was thinking about how much I miss my mother and my brothers and sisters because didn't know where they were at, didn't know what they were doing, and my father caught me crying, and he came across the floor through the kitchen like grease lightning, and he wrapped his hands around my neck and he choked me and shook me like a rag doll and said, "I bet not ever catch you crying over that bee." He asked me what was I crying about, and I said my mother, and that set him off. And yeah, so he choked me and shook me, and basically told me not to cry over my mother. So from that point on, excuse me, from that point on, I have never cried over my mother. Um, Whew. The school I started going to was Lomond Elementary School, and in the first grade there, walking to school during the first week of school, I got jumped by two fifth graders, or no, fourth graders, because they said I talk funny. They said I talk funny and I sounded stupid, and it was because I just at the time I had a country accent. So I got beat up for talking funny. They kicked. That was my first time feeling what it was like to be kicked in your peanuts as a male. It was my first time feeling what it's like to be kicked in my stomach, to be punched in the face. And I didn't fight back. I was non-violent at the time. I was a country kid. Wasn't no violence in that part of the country that I was in. I was a kid. And but these kids were different. And I didn't fight back. I didn't know how to fight. And they threw my papers out in the street, out my book bag, threw them all out in the street. And I had two suckers that I had got from the teacher, one for me and one for my sister Angel. So I was like, ooh, I got two suckers. I'm gonna get one of my sister Angel. No, they took my suckers too. So they, I kind of, I felt like, looking back now, I feel like I was Forrest Gump when it was like, hey, stupid, and hit him with the rock. They looked at me and was like, hey, stupid, and just, commenced to putting a hurting on me, all because I had a country accent. But yeah, that was my first week in elementary school. I was afraid to walk to school from that point forward. And from Delford to Lowmond Elementary School, it was, I want to say 5-6 blocks maybe. I could be wrong because city blocks are pretty big. But I had to walk to and from school each and every day, and I was terrified. I went home crying because I was scared to get in trouble. I was scared to get in trouble because my clothes were dirty, my clothes were torn. I didn't fight back. I was a non-violent country kid, so seeing people fight or get into arguments and stuff, it terrified me as a kid. I wasn't used to this type of life. I wasn't built for that at the time. I was a peaceful little country kid. One time we went, my family, or my dad, my grandmother, me, my sister Angel. My dad had taken us and grandma. We had went to go see some family members that lived in Philly or Philadelphia, and I remember being there as a kid. It was around Christmas or getting close to Christmas, and my dad and them were like, they told me, don't go upstairs and to stay out of the rooms. Well, I did. Up until they had went out to go drinking or something, because I remember they were drinking some alcohol with milk. It was something weird. I don't remember, but I do remember the milk, and they were mixing some type of alcohol. I don't remember which type of alcohol they mixed with it. But they were drinking, and then they all decided to go out and go drinking, and they left me and Angel at the house and by ourselves. And I had to go use the bathroom, and there was somebody else there. One of the other family members were there, but they wasn't really paying attention, and I had to go use the bathroom. Well, the bathroom was upstairs. So I went upstairs to go use the bathroom, and the bathroom was on the left, the first door on the left. I went into the first door on the right, and going into the first door on the right, as a young man, a young boy, whoever room this was, they were a pervert, because the walls all the way around and including the ceiling was nothing but the Penthouse magazine fold outs or the Playboy magazine fold outs of the whichever model or whatever was posing nude. Um, they were all over the room. There was not a spot on the wall that you could see actually paint. It was just covered from the floor to the ceiling, across the ceiling, back down the other side on all sides of the room were these cutouts or these fold outs of naked women. And as a kid, I'm just looking, you know, because I didn't know what a naked woman looked like. I mean, I did, but I did not like that, you know. And yeah, so I would say for me during that time, that's when the spirit of pornography entered in. Um, but as time went on, we obviously went back to Ohio after that visit. Um, Dealing with my mean grandmother, and she had this little dog named Topper. He looked like a mop. I don't know what kind of dog he was, but I couldn't stand that dog, and it was my responsibility to walk the dog. I was used to having big dogs in the country, but now I got this little fluffy mop-looking dog named Topper, and I couldn't stand him. And so I walked the dog, and my grandmother would always fuss at me about something, and she used to smoke these cigarettes called Virginia Slims. And I couldn't stand grandma because she would take us to church on Sunday. Every Sunday we went to church. It was a Baptist church in somewhere in Cleveland. But going down there, me and my sister would be riding in the back seat of the car, and the windows would be rolled up, and she would be chain smoking cigarettes. And I used to get so sick in the back seat, and if I cracked the window, oh, she yelled at me, "Oh, you gotta roll that window up," and this and that. And I hated it. I couldn't stand her. I could not stand her. So one day, Smoke was obviously gone at this time, and one day I forgot what she did, but she had said something to me, or basically fussed at me for something, and out of my anger and frustration, I went upstairs to my room and went to bed. And before I went to bed, I would always say my prayers at night. My basic prayer that I was taught as a kid. But I went to bed that night, and I tell people, if wishes are real and true, then I used up my one wish, because I wish my grandmother to die. And I kid you not, my sister Angel woke up the next morning, and she came and got me, and she said, "Charles, I think Grandma is dead." I said, "What?" So go down there, and sure enough, she's dead on the floor, on the kitchen floor. So yeah, if I used up my one wish, well, that was it. I wish I could take it back, because I would have wished for something else different. But and mysteriously, my dad pops up again, poof, and I was kind of used to my dad popping up here and there randomly, and then disappearing for long stints at a time. And little did we know it was gonna get real worse. But he popped up, and I felt guilty, and I didn't want nobody to know that. I felt responsible for my grandmother dying, because I wished her to die. So I took the dog for a walk, and I couldn't cry over my grandmother, you know. So I thought about other stuff. I thought about how unhappy I was and stuff. So that made me cry. And I told people when they asked me, "Oh, am I okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just crying. Grandma's gone, this and that." When in reality, I didn't care about grandma. Um, but my father, he buried grandma, and obviously we went to the funeral. Um, we went to the funeral, and yeah. So my father stayed around for a few weeks, and I would come home from school. The one day I came home from school, and my went to my father's room, and my father was counting money, and it was stacks of money. When I say it was stacks of money, it was stacks of money on the bed, on the floor, on the table. Uh, he had a lot of money and stacks that had the little bank bands around them or the bank straps around them. So I got excited, and I thought my father had hit the lottery. And I said, "Ooh, Dad, you won a lottery?" Because he would always play the lottery. And he said, "Boy, hush up! Ain't nobody win no lottery." And I didn't know, but little did I know at the time later on, I would find out that that was money that was meant for me and my sister Angel, and that my grandmother had real estate and stuff that my dad managed for my grandmother. Well, he sold all that stuff quick and in a heartbeat. Uh, so yeah, years later, I found out about that, and what came next, I couldn't adapt to. I never was able to adapt to it, and um, I never healed from it. So if you want to find out what came next, you have to stay tuned for part two. But I am Ugie. This is my story.